Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Sport Street. This week's topic we're going to be focusing on drugs in sport.
Starting point for this topic on drugs in sport, I think the best place to go is those who don't know a lot about sport is the public opinion of what we have.
Yeah, so we thought as a starting point, probably in the public opinion, drugs essentially on their own, obviously a no-go.
It's an interesting topic, that what people's perception are of drugs in general. If you just say to someone when you meet them on the street, drugs, what do you think? And a report published, it was 2014, that more people in current day and current times are taking more drugs than anyone else in the past, and it's becoming more widely known within society, and that a lot of adults take drugs, not on a regular basis, but sort of said once a month or so. But I think when you put it into the world of the sporting world, it's a massive area, it's a massive subject with a lot that does entail a variety of other factors.
A lot of historical perspective as well, if you think about it, a lot of scandals. I know that some of the reading I've done, it's gone into sort of Greek mythological times. Even there you can see them debatably doing things that you might consider in modern day drugs. So you could say for our modern day athletes, that's something that's deep within the sport itself, even despite obviously WADAs, things like that, holding a strong stance against it. You might say that there is perspective there from a long time ago for those athletes, that it is there.
Well, certainly it goes straight back to the way of the ancient Greeks and how they sort of took a stance on it, and they always looked to the ancient Olympiad and how they could win and how people could win, and it was never people just sort of man on man or bread and water. It was all different diets, concoctions, different medicines during that time and that period, and I think that's right from the get-go of sport, and it's always filtered through and always been a part of sport, and it's could be difficult to eradicate or difficult to perceive for some people, but while they're the World Anti-Doping Association, they're trying to create a fairness and equality in sport in modern times, but the sad thing of it is that a lot of people do take drugs, and a lot of athletes still do take drugs.
Well, I'll throw it out to you the point of sport, as we said there with the ancient Greeks, they were looking for, obviously you mentioned diet, things like that, pushing to be the best they could. So sport is seen to be a mutual striving for excellence. Do you not think that by the Greeks doing things like this, that is striving for that excellence?
Certainly, it's certainly trying to strive for athletic performance and excellence within that, but it's a will to win as well, wasn't it? And it was different costs of winning and how you were presumed back then in ancient times to what you get now, but you've got to sort of look at the factors of what you would have got if you won back then to what it is now. It is success, it's notability, it's prize. It hasn't changed in all that lot in that sort of area of the extrinsic factors of if you win, what happens. Possibly that's why a lot of people still do take drugs, but you got to say that how much money there is in sport in the modern times, you would like to think that less people take drugs and less athletes take drugs now because of the amount of money that they make within certain sports do and certain sports don't, but there's different factors involved in that.
Okay, so taking that argument against drugs in sports, I looked at it from the point of view of unethical, so against the spirit of sport. So what sort of looked at is, if one athlete might be doping but another isn't, obviously how can they be, it's their question of morality of doing that. It goes against that spirit of the said sport to a degree. And
certainly.
I think we looked ourselves at quite a few high profile cases, didn't we, over history, but more particularly we looked at modern ones as well, with the impact of the media, this such. I know that in football in particular we looked at the likes of Adrian Mutu.
Yeah, which
was a recreational drug. It wasn't a performance enhancement as such, but still, he got the ban, he got issued to pay that money back to Chelsea. It obviously had a massive effect against his career.
Yeah, massively did. And Mutu's not the only player that has done it, but I think it was because of the press within this country and the power they have and hold and how they can portray a player. He got caught. It didn't work out for him, and at the end of the day he got fined. I think it was his whole transfer fee Chelsea wanted back, which was 40 million, which he was deemed to pay back.
I think that also falls on the fact, a lot of it came down to the fact that he was that high profile transfer. He'd obviously just had his first season in England, done very well. He's a good striker for them, and I think it was because of that he was in the public eye that sort of issue came about like that, to that severity.
Yeah, and so the case of the severity of it, that it was the extent of what he got caught with, how much he got caught with. I know it was a 2-8 performance and it was recreational, but it was what it was at the time. But is he the only player to have done it? No, there's players out there who have done it. There's people in society who do it, and I know a lot within the culture in America is that a lot of jobs do drugs tests, and a lot within this country you don't find that as much within this country, but you see people, it's talked about. If people go on a night out, you can see it in the toilet, you can see it everywhere, culture, and it's for him to be fined that amount for what was nothing compared to what other athletes have gone for, it could be seen as a bit unfair and unjust. Because you look at other players, especially well, if you want to talk recreationally, you just got to look at Michael Phelps, probably the greatest Olympian of all time, medals wise, and he got caught smoking marijuana. I think it was in a club or a friend's house, not sure, but he gets caught and he serves a 6-month ban, can't swim, can't compete from 6 or 12 months, can't compete within that time, and got a fine off, but he hasn't lost his sponsorship. He's still gone back to win medals. Now, it didn't ruin his career, and people still see him as a great athlete that he is. So you can see the unjust with Mutu and Phelps.
I think looking at that in terms of recreational as well, it's interesting, especially in the modern sport. You could use a couple of examples with footballers such as Raheem Sterling, Jack Grealish, even just on happy gas or a shisha pipe, which you could argue, again, just recreational, not in the eyes of the law particularly, a drug that would be illegal, but
still affects the body.
Still affects the body, yeah. So they, in the media, get hammered for that, for using that when it is, again, just recreational. But I don't really know the difference between them doing that now and them doing that, say, even 10 years ago. That would have been fine. And it's just, again, that steps of the
probably wouldn't have even been reported that many years ago,
exactly.
And players probably have got away with it in the past.
Exactly.
I think the other side of all the recreational drugs you find within sport, you've got to go and look at America and that side of things and how they deal with it. Is it right or wrong that the NFL, that a lot of athletes get caught drugs or arrested or other things out there for quite a few of them in the past have been notable drugs cases, and they've been banned. Marijuana in the system, 3-game ban. Now, in the NFL, that's a massive period of time. 3 games can be playoff or not playoff.
Yeah.
And is that fair? Is that perfect? Is their system perfect? Probably not. But they've got a set of rules that they abide by, and that players go through if they know they get caught. This is this period that they're going to serve. Now, does a 3-game ban, would that stop someone from taking it? That's the question.
So you think maybe the severity, 3-game ban, maybe a fine, but if they've been caught, it's not to the extent of a couple of months ban. Yeah, Mutu, a couple of months ban, millions of pounds, affects your entire career, your whole image. Well, yeah, your whole image is ruined. I know in England you're caught with that. You're on the front pages of the paper. You're on every news channel. That it comes to that thing of their images just ruined in the eyes of the media, in the eyes of the children that they play in front of, all this and that. Parents won't want their children to be watching them play, and it can affect sponsorship, all sorts, whereas in America you get a 3-game ban, bang, you're back in the team, off you go.
And you've got to look at that ban, that period of the ban. Is that worse than, if we look at sort of Colo Touré, for example, what he served from just taking wife's diet pills. Now, as innocent as it may seem, and how easy it is to get hold of them, you could vastly argue that he is taking that for performance enhancement. I think he said it was for sort of aesthetic purposes. He wanted to take it to look better and not look as chubby.
Yeah, for a bit of weight loss, I think he said.
A bit of weight loss, he felt he looked fat and he wanted to take them. That's going to affect your performance. And
well, it's like if you relate back to the old Arsenal players with the old
Vic on the chest.
Yeah. That has affected performance,
performance.
And that's why it's been subsequently banned.
Yeah, and it's for someone so innocent, he served a ban from it, and you've got ones like that.
Could you argue again that severely impacted his career? Because I know he was at a certain level of player, and the player that came back after that ban really struggled.
Now, has struggled since.
Yeah.
Who was he at Liverpool? Who was he at the time?
He was at City, I think, at the time.
City
came back, didn't get back into the team.
Didn't get back into the team, he left and gone
so
to
again,
Liverpool and struggled to get into the first team regularly at Liverpool.
That recreational drug has had a huge effect on him, even, as we say, nothing to do with performance.
Might not even be performance-wise it's affected him, it could be psychological-wise that it's affected him. And you've got to look at someone so innocent like that to the flip side of something that someone knew what they were doing. Now, you got to say Cola knew what he was doing then. He was taking drugs, he knew what he was doing. Diet pills, as innocent as it is, does that differ from the likes of Dwayne Chambers and getting caught with that amount?
Yeah.
I think it was it EPO and steroids in his bag, whatever it was, getting caught with that amount at that period of time. Do you say his was worse than his was worse than his? Both first offences, I believe. It's both on the banned list.
What about Rio Ferdinand then? Because obviously we're talking about Carlos potentially being of innocence, and I know if you read numerous books, articles, particularly in Ferguson's autobiography, you will come across that Rio simply missed the test. And Ferguson sort of said himself, didn't he, that was just down to the laid-back nature, and he blamed the drug officials for not physically taking Rio to take that test, so they allowed him to forget. He obviously took the test the following day, but it was too late.
Yeah.
And if we look into the level of punishment he got the level of punishment of a doper. So he got the 9-month ban, and he missed best part of a season for United. He missed the European Championships for England, and obviously he's managed to come back and build his career, but that was 9 months out for something that you could argue he didn't even do. He just simply missed the test.
Certainly, I think it speaks character of the player as well. If you got to first look at the aspect of was the test missed on purpose? You could argue yes or no. You can't prove it. It's what he says against she says. You've missed the drugs test. It's been blown everywhere. There's probably athletes that have missed tests before and it's never been known, but he's missed his test. And within a football club, they've got a doctor at the club. He should know. Other medical staff should know. He should be notified. If it's his laid-back nature and he's missed it, well, it was a big wake-up call from them, 9-month ban. It's his fault. No getting away from it.
Absolutely.
But if it was just innocent, you could say it's harsh because it's a first offence, it's never happened, and you can serve up to 2 years or nothing at all.
Yeah, but as you say, when missing the test, he knows that there's a potential for a ban now. So he knows as a professional, obviously he'll have taken more drugs tests than that before in his career. He'll know the ramifications for if he misses that test. He should have been aware of a professional at his age.
Oh, he certainly should have, but it depends. Your players are like agents who rely on other people. He could have relied on someone else that always told him that and always showed him where to go, do this, do that. At this point, you've got to be here, you've got to be there.
Yeah.
And you got to think Rio's been involved within the Premier League football club since he was 14 years old, 15, 16 years old, coming through the ranks at West Ham. And he could have been mollycoddled too much, and this is, you've got a drugs test now, go there, okay, not really thought much of it. may have only ever had drug tests after a match in the past. You don't know. You may have not been aware that you had to go after training or so it could have been innocent.
Well, I know that I looked into, and obviously we've spoken about a few different substances, recreational or performance enhancing.
Yeah.
And I found that it's 3 criterions that it's measured on for the ban. So, medical, scientific or pharmacological evidence of an effect of a performance boost effect. Then there's the same judgment but health effect. And then the final one is, as I sort of introduced, we sort of discussed at the start, it goes against the spirit of the sport.
Yeah.
Which, the first 2, yes, measurable. You can see if there's an enhancement in a performance. You can see if there's an effect on health. How do you judge the spirit of the sport? Like that is something that is open to debate.
I think that's unique and why it's treated as a law, isn't it? If you're caught, it's a unique case. No case is treated the same. That aspect is, if you get caught with a certain substance, I get caught with a certain substance, your sort of ramifications of that could be completely different to how I'm treated.
Absolutely.
How do you deem, and it's just down to opinions of you, the people who are around you, the people who are doing an investigation, and whether or not it's happened in the past and what's happened to people in the past who have had that specific, been caught with that specific drug and how they've been dealt with. Now, you could argue that if a certain amount of people have been caught during the same time, or a drug is on the high list, and like the EPO scandal that's gone through completely, if you're caught with that with too many people getting caught with this, we want to make an example of this person.
Yeah. What about then, if we move on to, obviously on the matter of athletes, different judgment, different punishments. Sometimes an athlete can be unfairly pursued ahead of others.
Yeah, I think that's totally
I know we looked a lot into Lance Armstrong, didn't we?
Yeah, I think he's always been sort of the drugs in sport now. When people talk about it and
the
you talk to the public, it's name an athlete who's been caught taking drugs. Everyone goes to Lance Armstrong just because there was that amount of a global interest in it, and people who had never heard of Lance Armstrong before in their whole entire lives now know who he is just because of that situation.
I think he said himself when talking to the WADA that normally in a sport or in a crime or anything, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Certainly.
But as an athlete, and particularly an athlete accused of doping, or maybe obviously there's other severe things that can come into context, but you don't get that sort of beneficial treatment of that. You are kind of branded with that as the doper. And I give the example of just the past year gone, Mohamed Sakho at Liverpool.
Yeah.
He was banned by his own club, he was investigated by FIFA, and in the end he was innocent. But look at him now, is he anywhere near the Liverpool team? No, he's not playing. Could you argue that that is completely unjust? It might have ruined his image. I know that, particularly in the culture of sport, you might get abuse from fans for that, like from away fans particularly, and then that's affected his success ultimately.
Oh yeah, and you can even go back through that as a player and the effects that's had on his career now. That's down on him to come back now, but whether it may be a move away, if the manager, if he's confessed something to the manager's not happy, then there's nothing he can do about that. But you've got to look at the ramifications as well of what you said, of the fans, what they're going to happen, other officials that's going to happen, other players are going to get on it. Other players will get on your back on the pitch about it.
So it's like we said again, that public opinion,
this public
widespread
image, innocent until proven guilty. When Rio missed that, I always remember when he missed that drugs test, papers and people saying Rio's been caught taking drugs. Well, he was never caught, he just missed the test. And the amount of people that even said, oh, he's on drugs, and he still gets labelled with that now.
Yeah, there's that. The England players were going to boycott a game, weren't they? I think was Gary Neville and all of them, they were going to boycott the game in favour of Rio because he was getting so much abuse and being branded as the drugs taker, and they all said, well, he's not.
It's hard for a player. Yeah. It is very hard.
But if we move on from that point of the athlete has to prove his own innocence kind of thing that we were saying, and Lance Armstrong, going back to him, obviously the go-to figure, there's so much information out there. I found the quote that he stated, there was almost an irresistible pressure for many to dope.
Yeah, but you've got to look at where Lance was at that period in time. Now, is Lance's case an exceptional circumstance? Certainly is. Was it the first time he got caught doping? Well, he didn't come out and he confessed. But there was always that from when he won the first tour and into the second tour, he's taking drugs. And it was part of the culture and became part of the culture within cycling. But you've got to look at him, why was he doing them drugs to start with? Was it only him during that period? Or was it because of who he is and the pin-up boy within that sport?
Which links back to what we said about athletes being pursued.
Yeah.
So I know that they kind of brushed aside other athletes who might have even been doing similar levels of doping just to get Armstrong. Preferential treatment for those athletes just to get Armstrong.
During that time, because I think the FBI had a case on him and everyone else was looking into it, and they were getting other cyclists to confess and testify against Armstrong that it wouldn't go against their record or get them banned or tarnish their reputation. Now, Armstrong, I think it was in his BBC interview he did 2015 or maybe last year, but he said during that period he was a kid, just come out of sort of, and he said, I looked around, we all looked around as desperate kids and realised that you could get away with it. Yeah. And what were you going to do? Were you going to go and work back in a bike shop? Were you going to go back to school? Were you going to go... Because the peloton, the pace of the peloton was increasing drastically. If you look at the chart, the peloton during that time took off. Slower now than what it was then. And that's just an insight of, it wasn't just one man, if the whole peloton pace has increased.
Yeah, sort of that culture of acceptance in cycling that was building up. I know you can look into the Festina scandal, obviously that just showcases it was just rife throughout the sport. It was completely accepted between the athletes. You could argue they all knew one another were doing it, and it was just that acceptance.
And it just wasn't the team. Some teams did, and I think it was the year before, I think it was the 98 or maybe the 97, where the Spanish team got caught trying to come across into France with EPO. And was it easy for them to do? Yes. Was it easy for them to get hold of? Yes. And it was just there for them to take to be part of the sport. Was a cycling a multi-million-pound sport then? No. Did you have to win to stay on the tour? Did you have to be a good cyclist to stay on the tour? Yeah. If you didn't take the drugs, what was happening? I remember one of Lance's friends during that time who was on his team knew everyone was doing the drugs, and he dropped off in pace. And everyone else was increasing.
I read something really interesting that was, so obviously WADA goes through and they work through which drugs should be banned. Over time they find new methods, sort of ways of doping that they ban. But until they find that and that is officially banned, could you argue that an athlete isn't necessarily, obviously the substance there, but if it's not on a list of banned things and they take it, they aren't technically breaking the rules or the law of the game at that point?
No, not at that period in time. I think the best one seen is with sort of Dave Brailsford and the Sky team and everything what's gone on there this in 2016. Is it morally right what they were doing?
That's the big question.
That's the question. Were they using something to enhance performance? Yes. Was it on the banned list? No. Is it a substance a lot of people never heard of? Yes. But what's the difference between that and someone going in a high altitude chamber or wearing one of these new high altitude masks that affect your breathing, or...
I think there's another interesting point that goes with that, and it's athletes are always looking for ways to boost performance, so you can look into the elements of training, diet...
Not all athletes.
Well, not all athletes, but generally speaking, like, you could say Cristiano Ronaldo, his training overload has got his... You could argue played a big role in his success. The amount of hours, you always hear about these successful professionals who, they put the extra hours in, they eat correctly. Jermaine Defoe, as an example, he hasn't touched a drop of alcohol in his life. He'll eat correctly, he'll spend 2 hours extra than the young pros training because he wants to be that extra level. Could you say that's putting him that's something to enhance his performance?
But that's what works for him. You can look at the other side, is that Diego Costa has a beer after a match for Chelsea.
Yeah.
It creates a negative effect. Well, he only has one, and then he's supplemented with water, and it's been proven to be okay. Would that affect sort of how he has one beer and he's got to have water? Does that affect how he reviews the game in his head, how he reflects, how he thinks about the game?
I think Conte said as long as it was within an hour of the final whistle, didn't he?
Yeah.
Then that was acceptable to go through a system, and if it was not obviously like a binge, but that one beer, that's fine. But I think that could refer back to the health debate of the drugs itself, and obviously the fact that, well, one of the major points of banning a drug would be that it was unhealthy for an athlete.
You can't say drugs are unhealthy, but it depends what drugs and how the drugs are fashioned and what is contained within the drugs. So it's a massive debate, but you've got to look at the health debate. If you're going to take that into the drugs, are drugs testers doing the right thing at this period in time? That a lot of money is put into, do we go and find the drugs testers? Do we go to the athletes who are testing? Let's test here, test there, set a period out, or we're going to surprise test people. Now, I'd argue the case that they're doing too much on that and not enough looking at sort of PVC, abnormal heartbeats within athletes. Yeah. Like Fabrice Muamba, for instance.
Yes, goes unnoticed.
That blew everything up. But I know, like within cycling, that it's 0.5. That's the level. If you're above it, then you can't race. But there's a good case to say that there's too much on the banned list that shouldn't be there because of the effects that it can have within the body. Certain stuff should be on the banned list. I'm saying that should be artificial stuff, steroids example, but naturally occurring stuff that happens in the body. Are they wasting too much time to go and find them and find EPO, human growth hormone? That's naturally occurring stuff that happens within the body. Why should someone be banned for taking that?
Yeah, I think there's also the issue that a lot of these athletes take the drugs anyway and don't particularly care about the effect on their health. I know there's the study by Goldman's theory, and he noted that over half of the elite athletes that he asked would take a performance enhancing drug for guaranteed success, even if it meant they passed away 5 years later. Which obviously, I know that subsequent studies have come in and sort of found conflicting results, but that does show to an extent in that environment of athletes that he was asking that health isn't always the paramount of that. They are willing to look at success above and beyond.
Depends which athlete you look at though as
absolutely.
Well, because if you were to say to me, if he went to Usain Bolt and said, would you do it? He'd probably say, no, I'm at the elite of my game, I don't need to do it.
Absolutely.
Michael Phelps, I'm at the elite of my game, don't need to do it. Cristiano Ronaldo, at the elite of my game, don't need to do it. So therefore. But I think you get across, I think it was WADA did a report, or someone used a WADA report and reported an article that WADA believe 10% of athletes are still doping, and the highest percentage of them 10% of athletes that are still doping are up and coming athletes, not those at the top end of the game.
Yeah.
So that person could have interviewed athletes who are all just breaking through, and they've all said, "Well, here we go. That we would do it to become recognised."
Could you say then that is reflected in that though, that for an athlete for guaranteed success? So you could kind of say that that elite athlete in question, you would say probably hasn't already experienced that success.
Well, you could just say that was the whole case with Lance Armstrong then.
Yeah.
Because Lance was a kid when he went to Mick Alferrari and said, I'll be whatever you want me to be, I'll work, I'll do whatever you want me to do, just get me winning.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've got to look at the state of the mind that Lance was then. He'd just come out of, went to McAlphy first, then he got testicular cancer, battled through that, could have lost his life, comes back, in his eyes he could think he's got nothing to lose.
Exactly.
That's the individual. I got nothing to lose.
And then he's then the role model of the young kid that came through
next,
and used that to that.
Next,
so then
and
the
the whole
next
and then
generation,
you could have said he was bullying the whole peloton.
Exactly.
There was one where there was a case where someone was completely against the doping and was talking out about Lance, and Lance in the Tour, I think the lad broke away and Lance in the Tour rode up next to him and told him to keep his mouth shut.
Well, is it not even a bit... They make movies out and documentaries out of Lance now, just about the topic of doping. It's making money out of the topic and the issue of doping. I mean, you could argue it's putting it into the public eye of that, but it's also showing them how these athletes navigated around it and the different methods and how it was just rife. And does that not encourage the young athletes looking at it thinking, God, if all of them were doing it, and that's how they made it to the top and made a name for themselves.
But does it discourage them on the side of the dopers that we've caught such a big fish, he's been banned for such a period of time, that it is going to discourage other people from doing it?
And is that relatable to what we said about chucking those other athletes like deals to get at Lance because he was that figure that might scare others off?
Stop them doing it and become... But you've got to look at it in the other case of that it's affected cyclists now and those who aren't taking drugs. So you look at the Chris Froome incident where he got urine thrown over him because there was this whole thing that Chris Froome was doping, and I think it was in the Tour 2-3 years ago. Now that's affected him. No one wants that.
Exactly.
But Lance has affected the whole sport, but then we just pick on Lance himself and not everyone during the time. He wasn't the first one who started it, but it became a common norm. And you've got to look at why would he take drugs? Why did the athletes take drugs?
So what about if that doping was allowed in sport then, and the likes of Lance are being punished already, but there's many arguments through a lot of scholars for doping to be allowed.
Certainly.
And that if that happened, there would be several different viewpoints you have to take.
Now, if doping was allowed, does it change a lot of what currently goes on?
In terms of the practice, no. The doping procedures still have to be tested.
Does it make it any more difficult or easier for them to get the substance than what there is? Could do, could be involved within high-end clubs who are always there. But during Lance's time, he could walk into a pharmacy in Austria and get it off the shelf and walk out. And
so it's hardly hard to
get. And then you've got to look at sort of who the individual is, what are his morals, what is the character in himself. That those who do take drugs are generally people with lower self-esteem, sort of. They have a dissatisfaction with themselves or their body. Colo Torre, for example, didn't like his body. Well, I'll do this, maybe look a bit better. Sort of, it's either of impulse, which you could say sort of Phelps was, or Mutu, the cocaine. And then you've got the win at all costs sort of person, which you could say is Armstrong, Dwayne Chambers, within that win at all costs category. But if they were to legalise it, you've got massive sort of effects, and a snowball will turn into an absolute landslide, and from everything that'll happen.
Could you say those helping, obviously the doctors and those helping the athletes dope? I know that, for example, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, one of the doctors in the initial days that helped Lance, he's in prison now, or he went to prison for a period of time.
Oh, McAlphy.
Yeah, that has not happened to...
The film what came out, he tried to block that going into Italy. He tried to stop it going into Italy because he didn't want to his image tarnished.
But he obviously has suffered a much more on the price than Lance. But, well, you could argue
certainly,
Lance you could argue in the loss of his achievement and his name and everything, but he hasn't ended up in prison.
No, but Lance has not ever helped himself through that period of that. we're stripping you Tour de France titles. Next day, Lance uploads an image to Twitter of his 7 yellow jerseys. You'll never take these off me.
Yeah.
He's never helped himself.
I think it brings the ethical debate of that, like, there's the doper and there's the person that helps dope. And it's...
True.
Who's...
Or stops you.
Yeah, or stops you.
Or stops you, or notifies you.
Yeah. But again, there's another one...
Because you see that within football teams. Oh, I've got a headache, I want to take these, I'll ring up my doctor, bring up the club doctor.
And it has to be, doesn't it?
Can I take these? No, you can't.
And that's what the modern days come to. You can't take a single tablet without authorisation.
Yeah.
But there was another thing I looked into, and the lift of the ban. So if doping was to be just out there and allowed, would every athlete necessarily dope? No, absolutely not. Because there's still the question of morals. If it's lifted up and allowed, there's the morals of, if you've been raised as an athlete and you know that's wrong, or you want to perform to your natural ability, you are not going to do it.
It depends what you lift the ban on, though.
Absolutely.
You say, let's go free for all the drugs, take what you want. That's fine, because the health issues that have come from that is that there's no question that if that happened, you would have people dying before Olympics, during Olympics, after Olympics. You'd have people gaining liver problems, blood pressures would end up going through the roof. And then even if you said, right, we're going to cap it and you can do this, people will still abuse the substance. How are you going to monitor it? You can't monitor someone 24/7.
I think that's a good point you've made there about that, is even if doping was to ever be allowed in a way, it would still be extremely strictly managed by what they allowed. So even by allowing that, perhaps you could argue that by allowing that one bit, they open the doors and make it even harder for themselves, because then athletes are always going to be looking for the next thing that they can get legalised.
Yeah, there's like going back to what I said before about if they monitored sort of the heart and how that affects the heart and blood pressure, and stricter testing on health, and said, we're going to ban steroids, we're going to ban them, but you can take human growth hormone and you can go and take EPO.
Yeah.
Is that fair, or is there an issue there? Is there a deeper issue there?
I think it's very hard, isn't it? It's so deeply ravelled now that to pick and choose what would be allowed and what wouldn't be allowed, I think the rationale would have to be extremely strong to allow anything whilst banning others that you could argue would be similar.
Yeah. But there is the case to make that happen, because it is harder now than ever before to find drugs or know what people are taking. Technology is advancing, people are understanding what substances affect the body differently, science is advancing, and it's harder for them to be caught. And
absolutely.
Someone said that the drug takers and those who are given the tablets or how they're doing it are ahead of the testers, and it takes the testers time to catch up.
So they're always playing that cat and mouse game.
Playing a cat and mouse game. Correct.
I think there's another question about it as well. If they were to open it up and allow those things, the bracket and morality. So if you're actively encouraging, or well, not encouraging, but allowing an athlete to take a substance of a form, what does that say to the general public? Because drugs are banned across the general public, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, we all, like, as you said in the introduction, it's on the rise in the modern era, but they are banned. So if you were to then see an athlete doing it, what messages does that send to the general public about that? And it raises the issue of bracket and morality. That the blinkers are on in that sport and it's acceptable, whereas in modern society that's not.
Yeah, I think that's why I said that probably the best thing would be to do. You can only take things that naturally occur in the body, because if you say free for all, cocaine, heroin, doesn't have to be. I'm just going completely to the extremes of what drugs are. Is that some athletes may take that.
I think all you need to do is look at Gascoigne as an example, and look at the man now. And that was during the era of sport where that could be. You could get away with that, and if we reopen the gates for that, not suggesting that many athletes would, but it opens the door for that one or two athlete to just indulge in that, and it can be a life wrecker.
Oh, it certainly can be, and you would find it that the backlash that sort of the doping, anti-dopers would be catastrophic in the case of the backlash with people like who will fall ill, who will have health issues, and then on top of that you've got those who have been caught in the past.
Absolutely. And going back to Armstrong, if you go to that and you start saying that substance or that technique is now legal, how do you even begin to go about repaying that athlete?
Yeah, well you just look at what Armstrong was taking and what he confessed to taking, which was EPO, human growth hormone, blood transfusions, so taking his blood out, putting it back in. Now, that's no different to the effects of what high altitude training or in a mass can do for you. But to be fair, putting blood back in can have negative effects as well with blood pressure and cause health issues that way. So you can't really say, but that's difficult to test for.
Absolutely.
And then he was on testosterone, which you could say could be justified because of his cancer.
I think
and how low it was. And then he got caught for cortisone.
I listened to a podcast yesterday. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but they were discussing, and it was with the guy who set up the first sort of lab for drugs testing for the, I think it was the Los Angeles Olympics.
Right.
And he said at that time they went to him, and he had no knowledge, and he just had to build some knowledge, build a team. And he said at that point he built a team of 40 people for the Olympics, and then it just dropped off. And then the Olympic Committee came to him and asked him to continue with that, and he re-established it. And he said that team, the growth on it now, and he said they will spend months or years looking for that one method to get that banned. And essentially his career is looking for things to get it banned.
So the team's not big enough to fight the athletes.
So you were saying it's an ever-growing team, which, if you look at it in that way, it stays with what you said earlier about there's that 10% that are still going to dope. So there's still, especially as we said, the list of methods and the technology and everything like that is ever-growing. So with that, the recognition for fighting is going to be 10 times higher.
It's got to grow. It's got to grow with it. But
I think there was a really interesting thing I read as well, and that was going back to the thing if doping was allowed, and that you would have to introduce leagues where those athletes who didn't want to dope could just compete on a level playing field.
How do you test them?
And that, yeah, exactly, and that...
Oh, that athlete doesn't want to dope, but we're going to have a league that says you can dope but can dope naturally.
Exactly,
You're
it
going to
comes
have
with several different divisions. And
testing.
That's what the conclusion came to, was that the testing would still be needed, and if not needed, it would excel what it needed, and that would just put
stress on
so to even consider allowing it, if you're looking at these divisions that are already pushed to the limits in terms of assessing it, spending years of research to try and find things out, that then opens the gates for so much more.
And the effects on individual sports as well.
Exactly.
Because you have sports with, they're the non-dopers, they're the dopers. Who wants to go and watch what? We've got 3 different types of Olympics. We've got...
Yeah. And could you say as well, sort of referring back to that about the methods, like, it's just so hard for them to do that in that way, and to push the boundaries of the money. Like, if a treatment costs this much now, and then if it's suddenly allowed to an athlete, imagine how much the increase of the funds, if it's an elite athlete going for it, the funds of that treatment go up, don't they? Like, just as assuming, throwing it out there, but I would presume if that treatment became available and it was legal, the elite athlete pushed the cost up, so the average probably patient who might need that, how can they then afford it? And then it affects the general public.
Or does it go down?
Or does it go down, yeah, because it's more readily available.
There's all these athletes taking it, we can get more stuff out there, we can more money into the drugs.
So again, it refers massively into that money, doesn't it?
Yeah, because you just have people bulk buying. Then you've got the case of amateur sports and how it dwindles down and how it goes to everything there.
And how can people, the average Joe at the bottom of the sport trying to make their way up, can they access that drug to get them to that level? Will people ever be able to that level?
It's sad that you think the system at this current time, they're struggling to catch these people who dope. but then you've got stuff that naturally occurs in the body, which is even harder to test for and even harder to find. And if people get away with it, they get away with it. But if you were to say, right, we're going to make it legal, as good as it is, that naturally occurring stuff, and it's might not have harmful issues on the body, if you made it legal and took that strain off the drugs testers and they just tested for artificial stuff, you're going to get people who abuse that system, especially at lower levels. And how low down does it go? Do you have parents therefore trying to give it to children? As hard as it is, as a coach, we've seen parents who will push their kids that much.
I think you're, on a personal level, I know we've both worked in America, and you see the rich families over there, they will overload their children with steroids from a young age to benefit their athletic development or muscular development. And I've witnessed that on a first-hand account of kids going 3 times a day to take their steroids.
You've witnessed it, I haven't. But all I've witnessed was that out there, even you get it within this country, but I think it's the cutthroat nature of a elite sport and how much it is cost of going to university out there and college, and you can get a free scholarship through sport, they'll push that kids that extra bit more. And they would do that, and you get it within this country, parents within the football academies, kids who are within the pinnacle of their elite sport, we want to push them because they become professional and make a career out of it.
Absolutely.
And it's a sad and painful thing. The one thing I did want to touch on was the effects of if it did become legal to take drugs, and that a case of EPO and all that, you can take that and much occurs in the body. You will have a vast amount of people that will come back and not be happy, like you touched on Armstrong. He would want recognition for all his medals back.
Exactly.
Those who have sued him in the past because of this, because he sued them and they've sued him back, or sued him because of what he said.
The legal battles it would reopen.
The legal battles that would reopen, on top of what it has caused him on a personal level and what they could think he's lost during this period of time, is massive.
Now the psychological effects as well.
Massive. And then you've got the Russian, and you'll have people like Jessica Ennis, who has now picked up that World Championship medal from that Russian who tested positive. She's got to give that back.
Exactly. Imagine the effects of having to hand that over mentally.
I can't not thought about it. She dug during that time.
Exactly.
She's fine to give it back. Well, if doping was fine during that time, I could have doped and I could have won.
Yeah, exactly. I think an interesting place to sort of aim towards the end is an article we both read, is the war on drugs will never be won.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the point that I think we touched on it before, the cat and mouse game of these testers. They'll always be athletes looking for that edge or that method, and there'll always be testers. There'll always be the need for testers to be there to follow up.
There's always, and because of that, and it's because of individuals. Like I said before, that will to win, and breaking those certain individuals down into different categories, you're always going to get individuals that will fit in that category. And it is sad that that's happened, but will it ever be took out of the game completely? No. Are they doing the best thing they could be doing at this moment in time? Possibly. It's a system that is imperfect, but there is no perfect solution to fix that imperfect system.
It's always going to be that struggle.
Yeah, there's always going to be a fight against it.